All right, students, welcome to your first lecture for Psych 250. What I'm going to be doing is just going over a brief introduction to the course, and then we're going to dive right into the content. Again, I'd like to welcome you to Psych 250 Research Methods 1. If you're curious, this is an introductory course towards Research Methods 2, which if you're a psychology student here at CSU, you will be taking that Research Methods 2 course, which is a lot more stats heavy than what we're going to be doing here. We're going to be doing just introductory to research methods, talking about study designs, different ways of looking at data, different ways of recording data, and so forth. Whereas in the Research Methods 2, Psych 350, you'll actually begin diving more into the statistics and how to get results and write a discussion paper, where we're more focused on introductions and methods to papers here. I'm your instructor. My name is Neil Yetz. You can see me right here, or if you want to see me in my natural element with a puppy, that's right up top. You can always feel free to email me at neil.yetz@colostate.edu. I try to prioritize my students as much as possible, so even if you want to email me at the middle of the night, sometimes I'm up, I can sometimes send you an email back, depending on the time of night. But I will always try to return an email within 2 business days, if not sooner. If I don't respond to you within 2 business days, please email me again. I promise you I will try to respond. Sometimes I get a little cluttered with email, so I will miss it at times, but I'll always try my best to respond within 2 business days. So because of COVID, I'm going to have virtual office hours from every Monday through Thursday from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. In which case I'll be available via Canvas chat or quickly through email. And if you need to, if you want to talk via Teams or Zoom, we can set up a meeting that way as well. Again, during that time, I'll be as prioritize students as much as possible. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself before we get started in the class, because I think it's good to know your teacher a little bit. So me, Neil Yetz, you can see me in the bottom right corner of your screen, or I have a picture of myself right there wearing a Boston hat, which funny enough, I'm not really a Boston fan. I'm actually a San Diego Padres fan. I just happen to be in my element. I love baseball. So I previously acquired a degree in public health with a concentration in epidemiology here at Colorado School of Public Health, in which case I then transferred over and am now trying to get a PhD in applied social and health psychology at CSU. Some of my past research, I focused on yoga-based interventions for various populations, as with older adult populations, college student populations, veterans as well. I used to do a lot of mental health care program evaluation, which if you don't know much about program evaluation, it's a big booming thing right now. There's a lot of jobs in it. Every program that comes out, every hospital needs some sort of evaluation team in it. I also did something where I visually displayed missing data in these big healthcare data sets. Yes, this is indeed a thing where I just found missing data. These are so complex, such large data sets that we need to find a systematic way to find missing data, why it's missing, how it's missing, and which ways we can fix the missing data. Sometimes there's even times where you want missing data. But now I currently work with at-risk adolescent populations and using mentorship as a way to improve positive transition into adulthood. I work for a program called Campus Connections, which some of you students might be familiar with, might not. If you're not familiar with Campus Connections, I encourage you to try and visit Campus Connections and maybe even join it during your time here at CSU. It's a program where we have at-risk adolescents get mentored by college students. So you as a college student can mentor an at-risk adolescent within the Fort Collins community. And lastly, I do a lot of things with social network analysis, which means I measure the bonds between people and I say, hey, how does this relationship affect some outcomes later in life? And a little bit away from my kind of research, I really enjoy running, mountain biking, snowboarding, all your typical Colorado activities. I do enjoy doing statistical programming on my free time. I really enjoy sitting behind a computer. If you are familiar with R, if you're not familiar with R now, you will be familiar with it in Psych 350 because you will be learning how to use it. We won't be using R in this class, so don't worry if you thought that was a thing. I like hanging out with cute puppies, as you can see from my last picture. I like all types of music. Really more of a punk rock person, but I really enjoy any type of music. I listen to records on the daily. I absolutely love everything about it. And next, I'd like to really hear more about you. This is normally the part of the class where I'd go around and have everyone introduce themselves and answer these questions out loud in front of the class. However, thanks to COVID, we're not able to do that. So some things I would love to know. I'd love to tell me what you like to be called. That way, when I address you during emails or if we have a Zoom or Teams chat, I can talk to you with your name that you prefer to be called. Let me know your major. I assume that most of you are psychology majors, but it might be different than I'm not sure. Let me know your favorite food. I know that's a tough one for people, but I would love to know. Let me know what you would like to do with your degree. Just kind of, I know you're early in your career, but let me know kind of what you're thinking and things like that. Maybe I can even let you know kind of what my thoughts on it. Anything that you're doing, I'm sure is interesting. And then lastly, this one's more for me, but find me an interesting fact and put it here. So, did you know that platypuses do not have stomachs? Because I didn't know. I just looked that up. I thought it was amazing. I know Laura posted one that where grizzly bites are as can break a bowling ball, and Allie posted one that's saying that uh, armadillo shells are bulletproof. Like those are amazing facts. So keep them coming. I would love to hear them all. I like to start off all of my courses with expectations. So, some 5 expectations I have here is that I want you to be engaged in this course to the best of your ability. I think that is a very interesting topic. Not everyone may agree, but you know what? Try your best to be engaged. This is important stuff for even if you're not getting into research as a psychologist, to understand the research is a big part of being a psychologist. I want you to make sure you ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions if you need help with something. If you're struggling on quizzes or on tests or you don't have trouble with understanding the assignments, there's no stupid questions. I'll help you to the best of my ability. You need to make sure that you watch all of the lectures. Now, the lectures are pretty important. They're probably one of the most important parts. If you're going to do good on the quizzes or the tests, to really watch the lectures because really most of the quizzes are based off the lectures. I would also love it if you did the assigned readings. Um, one of your books is this book by Beth Morling, Research Methods in Psychology, which is actually a really interesting book. Part of it is because it's an interesting book. I can't cover everything in the book on the slides. You'll find that sometimes I follow the book very regularly, and then other times I very much drift away from the book and we don't talk about it at all. So there might be quiz questions that are basically on the book as well. So it's really important that you do the reading. And there's a lot of good information in there. And the APA manual that you'll be reading will be a little bit dry. Luckily, we only have 2 chapters from that we need to read, but that's going to be a really important book too. Additionally, you will be active on the discussion boards when we have them. I'm going to be honest, I've kind of compiled the class and I actually kind of decided later that discussion boards, I'm not really a big fan of discussion boards, so there's actually not going to be as many discussion boards as I originally thought when I wrote this. But when there is a discussion board posting, please be active in it and engaging as well. So what are we going to learn in this course, right? So the first thing is we're going to understand the steps involved in designing a psychological research. This is specifically to psychological research, but really it could be drawn out to many other research fields as well. Ecology, they use similar methods that we use in psychology as well. And a lot of your public health fields will use a lot of these methodologies as well. I have a degree in epidemiology, and a lot of things that I learned in psychology were very similar to what I learned in epidemiology. I want you to describe a variety of methods used for collecting data in psychological research. So we'll be learning about survey research, observational research, archival research, many different ways and how the pros and cons to each of those data collection methods. We're also going to help you to understand the strengths and weaknesses of each of these research methods. There's a lot of different ways to collect data. There's a lot of different study designs that we can use, but each of them have their pros and cons. There's no best way of doing things, unfortunately. It's not so clear cut. So we'll kind of talk about those discussions. And then lastly, we're going to talk about how to write an APA style. APA style is kind of, to me, it's a little monotonous, a little boring, but it's kind of the very important way. If you're ever going to write in psychology, be a researcher in psychology, or even talk in psychology through some sort of written paper, any written way, you need to know APA style because it's pretty important. So as I discussed before, we have two books that we're going to have to be reading here. The first one is Beth Morling's Research Methods in Psychology. The reason I chose this is because I thought it was a very engaging book. It really lays it out simply. They're very straight to the point as well. Beth Morling is a great writer. And again, please read this book to the best of your ability. The next book is going to be the APA Publication Manual. This is 7th edition, so which is actually kind of new to me. I learned a lot in the 6th edition of the Publication Manual, so I'm still learning the 7th edition as we go along in this class. Now, there's only 2 chapters that we're going to be reading out of the Publication Manual, but this is a really important book to have. In fact, I would encourage you to buy this book and keep it throughout your career here at CSU or any kind of schooling that you do from here on out. You're really going to need it. It's going to be around for a while. The APA Publication Manual really has all the information you need. It's a lot better than searching through the internet, honestly. Normally, I would say just Google it. But here, the APA Publication Manual has all the information you need in one book. So I really encourage you to buy that book. If you want to rent the Beth Morling book, that's okay. But I would actually really encourage you to buy the publication manual if possible. So I'd like to talk to you about the course project. So throughout this course, we're going to do a course project and we're going to do it piece by piece. So the final project is going to end up being a research proposal, which really, when I say that, I just mean you're going to write the introduction and the methods portion of a research paper. If you've read a research paper before, there's an introduction, there's a methods, there's a results, and there's a discussion portion. We're going to cut out the discussion and results section and only talk about introduction and methods. So to do this, the first thing you're going to do is I have a Qualtrics link. You can go ahead and do it after this class if you'd like, or if you'd like to wait until the actual July 15th. But the first thing you're going to do is first rank a topic. Now I've got 4 theories that I'd like you to discuss. That's I forget the names of the theories, but social identity, dissonance theory, and a couple other theories that you're going to be talking about, social comparison theory, that I'm going to have you rank between. And from there, you're going to choose whatever sounds the most interesting to you. Then you're going to do a lit search or summary of that topic. So you're going to really start off looking at that topic. What I like to do is sometimes I go to Wikipedia and I just type it in first. And then you're going to do an actual literature search. Before we do the actual literature search, I'm going to teach you how to do an actual literature search, about how to find actual authentic peer-reviewed journals, which is going to be a very important part of this class and a very important aspect of your paper in order to properly write it. Then, after you've done your kind of lit search and summary of that topic, you're going to kind of go into what the real researcher role is, in which case you're going to form a hypothesis based on that topic. You're going to say, okay, now that I have all this background information on this topic, what do I think can happen? What do I propose will happen because of this theory that I have in my hands right now? And it can really be as broad as you like, as specific as you'd like. I'll try and guide you based on what your hypotheses are. And before we even do that, I'm going to teach you how to write a proper hypothesis as well. Then I'm going to have you write the introduction part of the paper. So I want you to do the introduction, have it turned into me before you even turn in the final paper. That way I can see if you're at the correct writing level, if you're on the right pace, if you're doing the right things. If you have any questions, I know that this can be tough to write a paper. Sometimes it's a little vague. I'm going to try and be as specific as possible as what I want you to write for me. Then lastly, you'll turn in the final paper. This is going to be an intro and a method section to a paper. And I want you to know that I'm not going to accept this portion of it late. Now, the other parts of it, if you turn it in late, I'll accept it for kind of like half credit. I honestly forget what I wrote in the policy about and in the syllabus about this, but this is the one that I will not accept late. That's partially due because of grading. I need to get things to the department by a certain time. So if you turn in a late paper, then it kind of like throws off my whole drive and it doesn't really work. So that's due August 9th. That's going to be your final paper. You'll also have a final exam due around the same time. We're also going to have some quizzes, and you'll have some discussion board posts as well throughout your time in this class. All right, so that sums up the introduction. We're going to go ahead and dive right into a new topic now. Here we are, Unit 1, the beginning of this summer course, where we're going to talk about scientific reasoning. So a little bit about how I design my classes is I always have a series of objectives that we're hoping to learn by the time that we end the unit that we're on. So for this one, I'd like us to define and distinguish empiricism, what a theory is, what a hypothesis is, and how data relates to all of that. We need to know what makes a good theory, and we need to want to kind of understand what research is in general, is what I'd like to cover throughout this unit. So one of the biggest overarching terms in the psychological research and research in general that goes beyond psychological research, this is biological sciences, physical sciences, is empiricism. Now, empiricism is this overall understanding that we use evidence from our senses, or even better, instruments that assist with these senses. For example, something that actually measures it accurately is like a thermometer, or even taking a picture of something, or some sort of using a ruler that kind of works with our senses as the basis for conclusions. It's really saying, if there's some sort of basic construct of understanding these things, is it visible? Is there some way that we can measure what it is that we are attempting to study? So these empirical sciences aim to be systematic, rigorous, and to make their work independently verifiable by other scientists. And that independently verifiable by scientists is a really important aspect. We can't just say that it works if one of us saw it. We need other people to be able to come and find the same conclusions for it to be empirically sound. So building off this idea of empiricism and empirical science, there's a lot of terminology associated with that makes it more empirically sound. So I'd like to start off with kind of our overarching understanding, which is called a theory. So a theory is a statement that describes general principles about how variables relate to one another. So this is, I'm sure theory gets thrown around a lot, and you've heard it a lot, especially in Psych 100. We're really going to be discussing kind of the basic aspects of theory in this, and just know it's a very complex topic. From a theory, we can usually build off and build a research question. A research question is a question that a research project sets out to answer, and it should be derived from a theory. So if a theory states A is connected to B, we can say, okay, if A is connected to B, then what happens when we throw in this new variable into it? Should A should still lead to B if the theory should hold up. Now, it should be noted that theories don't work in all applications. The point of a theory is that it should work, in as many applications as possible. The better a theory is, the better it works in more broad applications. But that's not always the case. So a lot of our research questions are saying, what are the bounds of that theory? Is there a certain part where that theory quits working? And then the next thing that we're going to be talking about is a hypothesis. So a hypothesis is a specific answer the researcher expects to observe in a study. And at some point in this class, we're actually going to be talking about how to specifically write exact hypotheses. And we're actually dive pretty deep into hypothesis writing and how that's derived from research questions. So you have the research question, and then you build your hypothesis. This is where you're saying you're giving the actual answer that you expect to see from the research question. So you ask the question and you say, I expect the answer to be this, and that's your hypothesis. Lastly, we're going to talk about data. Now, data is what you use to answer all these questions. Data really is everything. So data, just to be very specific, is a set of observations that quantitatively measure the research question. So what that means is that we are actually collecting some sort of observations and measuring it, and then we can do some sort of statistical analysis to say, hey, is our research question verifiable? And our research question, if it works, it should be held up by some sort of theory. Now, if you've done your reading, you'll see that Morndling really talks about this idea of the theory data cycle. In which case, you can see that really we start off with our theory, then we build a research question, and from there, we can make a research design to try and answer that research question. And that research design is really a big part of everything as well. And from our research design, we say, okay, if we manipulate some variable in this way, we expect this to happen, which would be our hypothesis. And what is hypothesis and research questions and theories supported by? Well, it's supported by data. Now, if you find that the data supports your theory or research question, then you go and you lead it over and you say, okay, our theory is supported. And then we can go through the entire process again and say, well, we still want to know the bounds of this theory. At what point is this theory not supported, or is it just supported by everything? We're not really sure. Chances are there's some bounds to some theory, especially in psychological research. There's the bounds to a theory. This might be something like it works in a different population differently or something like that. Perhaps this theory works really well in American populations, but in European populations, it doesn't work as well. We're not really sure. So we have to keep testing and testing and testing. That's why it's a cycle. We say, okay, we found support, let's test it another way. We found a support, let's test another way. If we didn't find support, that doesn't necessarily mean that your data is bad. What it means is that we may have found a bounds to this theory. It is possible that your data was bad or that you had a bad research design or something like that, but we revise our theory and we can have new research questions based on that. We say, okay, why wasn't this supported? In what way can we change the theory so that it fits this? Or what is it that we need to, what is it about the theory that's different? Do we need to devise a new theory for a new population? It really all depends. But what we're seeing here is that this entire process is cyclical, right? Once you get all the data and you answer a research question, well, we're not done. We have to keep going and we have to keep understanding. So, as I like to call it, it's a little bit of job security for us. For the next set of slides, what I'm going to do is we're going to be diving into what makes a good theory. What makes a good theory is three different things. One, a theory is supported by the data, it's falsifiable, and it's a word known as parsimonious. So let's go ahead and dig into that first one. A good theory is supported by the data. We know it's a good theory if we have a lot of research studies on it. And additionally, these research studies come up with consistent results over and over again, right? So if it's supported by the data, we can see that we're getting the same results every time, or at least something close to the same results every time. If we're constantly seeing conflicting results, which does happen sometimes, it means maybe we need to build a new theory. Something is up with this theory that we're not used to seeing. And additionally, a good theory is you can use a variety of methods and get the same results as well. So a variety of methods, so if I'm using different populations, if I'm using different statistical procedures, and overall encompassing, we should be seeing the same exact results because our theory is, potentially true. So this next one might seem a little bit opposite of what I just told you, in which we say a good theory is falsifiable. But what I mean by that is that we can actually generate a hypothesis in which we say the opposite could potentially be true. If a theory is not falsifiable, then there's no point of it even being a theory, correct? So we need to be able to have some sort of test for it and say that, when we develop it, we don't know that it's necessarily going to be true every single time. So when we develop a good theory, we're saying, okay, there is a possibility that this theory could not hold up given the conditions I give it. So we're testing again. It goes along with testing the bounds of that theory. So it can be tested and we can generate that hypothesis, which we will be digging way deeper into about how to generate a proper hypothesis in later lectures. And then lastly, a good theory is parsimonious. Now, some people might not understand what that word means. Really, parsimony is the same exact word as simplicity. Why we don't just use the word simplicity, I'm not really sure, but parsimony seems to be the preferred word in scientific research and in empirical studies. And what this means is that whenever there's a more parsimonious, or other words known as a more simple theory, one that can kind of has less variables associated with it, one that has less associated with it, we'll always choose the more simple one. Why? Because simple is easier, right? We'll always want a simpler theory so that we can explain more with less work, is really all we're saying. So a good theory is parsimonious as well. We want it to be simple. Now I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk about types of research. So we have three types of research that I'll dig into a little bit more detail. We have basic research, we have translational research, and we have applied research. Now, basic research is where we're not really addressing a specific problem. We're doing something called exploratory research. Exploratory research is saying we don't really have a real hypothesis, we don't have a real theory potentially bound to this. It could have a theory associated with it, but we're not really sure which way it's going to go. And the hypothesis that we develop, we're really unsure. We actually can do something called what's called creating a non-directional hypothesis, where we say, look, we're not sure which way this is going to go. So that's really what your basic research is. It's that more exploratory, more trying to figure things out so that we can develop a theory later from that. The next is called translational research. Now, translational research is where you're in a lab setting, you have some sort of more developed hypothesis. However, you don't want to develop it into the real world, which is what applied research is going to be. You are taking a theory and creating a research question, a hypothesis that's been developed before, but you don't want to apply it to any real practical situation. So you'll do it in a lab setting. This is where a lot of like animal research is done. This is where, if you're in a lab setting, you're likely part of translational research. Lastly is applied research. This is where you're actually doing things in the real world. This is kind of where I focus in, I focus in the applied research world, where you have some sort of more developed theory. You have some sort of specific research question that you're hoping to focus on. And you're not doing it in a lab setting. We're not just doing this on college students. You're in the real world. So I'm in a school with a lot of people, and I'm in a workplace. I'm saying, look, how well does this theory hold up? How can I use this theory to actually help people in the real world? It addresses some sort of practical problem. What if I'm interested in outcomes associated with students? What if I want to improve grades on students? I can have some sort of tutoring program that's built off of a theory saying that tutoring is expected to help improve school grades. Is one way. So we're addressing that practical problem. So just to kind of sum up, basic research is this idea that it's just exploratory. We don't have any specific research question in mind. We're just kind of focusing on, this is the very early stages of the research process where we're just trying to figure out something, if anything. We can't have any bold decisions. Translational research is when some sort of theory has already been developed and we have a research question that we can develop, but we're not comfortable utilizing it within the real world population. And applied research is that understanding that we have a real kind of concrete theory that we are working with, and we are going to start utilizing it and start addressing a practical problem and trying to see if we can see a change in the world. And that's the end of your first lecture. Thank you so much. And I always like to end my lectures with a summary slide. So just so we can kind of talk about it. Remember, we talked about what a good theory is. There's those three aspects of what a good theory is. A good theory is supported by the data, it's falsifiable, and it's parsimonious. And remember, parsimonious is just another word for simple. Additionally, there are three types of research. There's basic research, which is that exploratory kind of research. There's translational research, which is that research that we focus things on a lab setting and are trying to get it towards this applied research. And applied research is where we're actually practically in the real world and applying our research in that real world setting. Which is a lot more of what I do, is that applied research aspect.